close up, we just spoke with her opponent. Now it's Carol Shea Porter's turn to address why she is the right choice to go back to Congress. The former U.S. rep making a case to voters once again that she is better suited for that job in Washington. Thanks for joining me. You're fighting a cold, so you said don't shake your hand. That's why I'm not going to do that. Good morning. How's everything going in the campaign?
I think it's going great. We've been very busy. We've been all over the district, and what we're hearing is that people want a Democrat in that seat. They want me to win, and so I'm getting a lot of support, and I'm very grateful for it, and we're ready.
Same thing I asked Congressman Ginta. I mean, this is a cycle where people have shown that they're frustrated with the status quo. This is matchup number 4 against Frank Ginta. Not a whole lot of change in recent years there. How do you make the case that, you know what, I should go back down and I'll be different?
Because he didn't get anything done, and I did. And people know that when I was there, we all worked hard. We kept the economy from falling into depression and brought it back. We invested in people. We brought health care to people. We were strong on defense. We worked very hard to raise the minimum wage. And the things that people care about, we were actually getting done. And people know that if you look at that period of time, it was the most productive Congress since Roosevelt. And then the Republicans took the majority, and it's been difficult since.
Do you think that when you talk about defense, do you think the country is safer now than it was in 2008 when Barack Obama first took office?
I think that this is a really dangerous time around the world, and we have to keep our defenses up. I spent 6 years on the Armed Services Committee. I know how committed men and women are in this country, and not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. I think this has to be a nonpartisan issue. Our national security is that important. So we have work to do, but I feel like every single year we have invested more and are really working hard to make sure that we catch terrorists, that we work with other countries, and that we do what needs to be done. But it's a dangerous world, no question.
You talk about catching terrorists. The president has said that he wants to close Guantanamo Bay, says it makes the problem worse, sends the wrong message. Some Democrats disagree with him. Where do you stand?
Well, I have always wanted the military. We had problems under the Bush administration, and we all know about that, so no sense going back there. But I have confidence that the military could do these trials. They didn't go right at the beginning, certainly, and it's been way too long, and just what happened there was really a bad chapter. But I
talking about a Gitmo,
right?
Early on.
It was yes, a very bad chapter. But the point is that I do believe that the military lawyers are capable of doing this. But this has dragged on far too long, and we really do have to take care of this.
But does Gitmo go away if it's your call? I mean, or is that the best option in a number of options that aren't great?
Yeah, they really aren't. But I think our primary concern always has to be to protect the people of this country, and indeed, people everywhere, from terrorism.
So you'd keep it open?
Well, I think what we need to do is finish those trials. I don't think it can stay open forever, but I think they need to finish those trials. And the military, I believe, has the capability of doing that. But because it went wrong for so long, I think a lot of people are deeply concerned about that. There were a lot of things that should not have happened.
Where do you fall when it comes to Syrian refugees? Because there's even some division in your own party about whether and how many the U.S. should take.
Right. Well, again, the first and foremost thing is we have to protect our security. That's our responsibility to the people of this country. So we have to be extremely careful in the vetting process. But we also have to remember that we have always been a land for refugees, that people have fled to our shores, and we've always been very proud of that. And what we're seeing happening in Syria and other places in the world right now, nobody can doubt that almost every single one of those people, is a refugee from terrible violence. But I believe that we can properly vet. It's a difficult process they go through, and I think we need to continue to do very intensive vetting. We have to be 100% certain before somebody comes. But we saw that little 5-year-old, trying to wipe the blood off his hands. He'd just been bombed. He's sitting in an ambulance. I believe his brother died. We know that these families are fleeing awful, awful violence, and so we have to be compassionate as well as being very, very careful.
Let me ask you about the top of the ticket. Obviously, Donald Trump is certainly a figure that has been divisive with his own party. Hillary Clinton hasn't had the huge coattails that some Democratic candidates down ballot would like. And Governor Hassan, struggled with that a little bit when she thought that she was trustworthy. One, I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked Frank Ginta. Do you think people are trying to be too fine with their answers about the top of the ticket? And two, do you think Hillary Clinton is trustworthy?
Well, I think that the Republicans have a real problem with Donald Trump, and it's very clear. Just yesterday, a lot of Republican former members of Congress came out and said, it's not about your party, it's about your country. You can't vote for Donald Trump. We're seeing Republican security leaders saying you can't vote for Donald Trump. We're seeing that party, as well as our party, say you can't vote for Donald Trump. So I think that Frank Ginta, who has fully endorsed him, and others who have done that, need to look very carefully at what these leaders of our country are saying. Republican leaders that we all respect are saying that Donald Trump does not have the temperament and he's not fit, not to mention all of the ways that he's attacked pretty much every single group. So it cannot be Donald Trump. And we're seeing all of the Republican newspapers saying not Donald Trump. We're seeing papers that haven't endorsed a Democrat in 100 years and longer saying it can't be Donald Trump. We have to take this very seriously, that it cannot be Donald Trump.
But Hillary Clinton does have integrity questions surrounding her with a lot of voters.
Well, you know, I would not have endorsed her if I didn't think that she was trustworthy and ready for this job. And all those Republicans who are endorsing her would not have endorsed her either if they didn't think that she was ready and trustworthy and that she could be president of the United States. I think the most important part here, Josh, is to remember that these are Republican leaders in national security who are saying they trust Hillary and they don't trust Donald Trump. These are Republican leaders and newspapers, etc., saying it cannot be Donald Trump.
Fair enough. Let me ask about the debt and deficit. You know, we've talked about the $20 trillion in debt. Last cycle it was 17. The tipping point is 24. How do we reverse that number? It's the same question I asked for Congressman Ginta, but at one point we're not going to be able to borrow anymore.
Well, I think we need to listen to people like Warren Buffett, who has been incredibly successful in his life. And he keeps saying that we have to change the tax code, and it's come to be called the Buffett rule. And he said it's not right that his administrative people pay far more than he pays on his income. So we need to tell the truth. We have to reform this tax code. And what's happening here, because of all the lobbyists that you know, these multinational corporations have been able to employ and others, that what's happening is that we're seeing the middle class continuously whacked. I've been talking about this from the very beginning, and we're seeing small businesses continually whacked because there's so much money, so much dirty money in Washington that's protecting those special interests. So there are things that seem like so sensible, and we can't get them done. For example, negotiating the price of prescription drugs for Medicare, which we know would save billions over a 10-year period. Can't get it done. Why? Because there's big pharma in there, and there's, you know, a lot of special interests that are preventing it from happening. So we have to tell the truth. You're right. I mean, we have too much debt here. I've been talking about that debt since 2006 when I first ran. So, and actually, everything I talked about in 2006, I've looked at my campaign literature, and I'm still talking about it. I'm talking about the middle class. I'm talking about taking care of people, having them feel that they have a chance to get a piece of the American dream, that they can educate their children without drowning in debt, and with their children drowning in debt, that they get a fair wage, and that they get a retirement that will allow them to take care of themselves in old age. Just
about out of time, and now it's 2016. How do you make the case to voters over the course of the next few weeks that Frank Ginta needs to be fired and you need to go back down to Washington?
I think they all know that Frank Ginta got in trouble, you know, at the Federal Election Commission. It was a 6-0 decision. I think they all know that that was the first part. But the second part was, he could just lie about it himself, but what he did was he lied and said I was lying. And I think that makes a difference. And that he lied to not just me or about me. What it's really about is that he lied to the people of New Hampshire, so they know they can't trust him. And I don't think I have to say anything more. I think it's very clear. That's what his Republican opponent said about him, and that's Kelly Ayotte said that he should step down, and a lot of other Republican leaders in New Hampshire said that as well. So I'm not trying to make the case like that. I'm just talking about what I do and what I'm standing for. I'm standing for affordable education. I'm standing for protecting a women's right to access to Planned Parenthood. I'm standing for supporting the economy, etc. So I'm the same person.
All right. Well, I hope you feel better. Best of luck moving forward, and we'll see you on Election Day.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Good to see you.
No handshaking.
I know.